Cyndi Sullivan. Thank you for joining the HOA Beat today. We have Zac Moretz with us from Moretz and Skufca.
Hello.
He's the managing partner. In addition to representing homeowners associations in the area, Zac is also a certified specialist in commercial real estate law. So great to have you here with us.
Thanks for having us.
Yes. Okay, so today we're going to talk about leasing and how it can affect homeowners associations. We've seen in recent years it's become really big business for investment companies to purchase homes in communities, and that's really skyrocketed with the when everything started to foreclose much around the country. So the question is, should your HOA have leasing restrictions? So let's start by saying, is leasing good or bad for an HOA? How does it affect HOAs?
I would say overall it's bad. So a certain proportion of leasing is fine, but if it gets more than 15 to 20%, you can have problems. And for example, in a condo building, the FHA won't even insure loans if it has more than 50% rentals for an older building, or now for a new building 30% or more. So the federal government has actually determined that tenants are not as vested in the success of the community, and property values are not sustained as well when there are a good number of rentals. So generally you definitely want to restrict it.
It's interesting, right? And so as a management company, we don't necessarily know conclusively if a home is a rental if there is an off-site mailing address. We assume that, but sometimes the owner may just be in a different location for part of the year, or it might just be a second home, So, so let's talk about, are homeowners associations allowed to place a limit on the number of renters?
Yes. There is no law in North Carolina or South Carolina stating that an HOA cannot restrict leasing, and could even potentially completely prohibit it. Now, we wouldn't recommend that, but there's no law that says it can't be very strictly restricted in your HOA documents. It is a restriction on the use of your property, so it does have to be in your recorded restrictive covenants to be able to do it. So that is, you can't just do it by rules and regulations. We get that question sometimes.
Right. Okay. So if a board feels this is something important for their community and residents, have expressed an interest, how do they go about placing these restrictions, as part of their governing documents? Right.
Well, many CCRs or recorded restrictive covenants will have a little bit of restrictions on leasing. Typically, often they'll say a lease can't be, no property can be leased for less than 6 months or something like that, but you definitely need more fortification than that. So assuming your HOA does not already have restrictions in its documents, you'll need to amend your restrictive covenants, and that requires a 67% vote in North Carolina.
Unless your covenants state otherwise. It could be sometimes 75 or...
Well, it could be higher, and then in South Carolina it's up to whatever the documents say. But
Okay.
generally it's 67%. And you'll have to have a special meeting, you'll have to call a meeting, you'll have to get the word out. Sometimes your board members need to go door to door and beat the bushes a little bit to make sure you get a good turnout, so you get enough votes in favor. You'll hold a special meeting. We'll usually draft up your what the amendment's going to look like so people can get an idea of what they're voting for. You have that meeting, and hopefully you can get that 67% threshold, and then we record an amendment to your documents, which would usually have a couple pages of specifics of exactly what situations leasing is allowed and what the leases have to look like, things like that.
So one of the things we've done that's been helpful is we try to communicate with owners before attempting an amendment, incurring some legal fees for that, because you can do like a survey to say, hey, would you be in favor of this type of amendment? And the reason that's important, what if you already have a lot of investment companies in the community or folks renting their home, they're not going to vote for it. So maybe helpful to gauge, hey, will this pass? Because at the end of the day, that's the goal. You don't want to spend a lot of money if you know it's not going to happen.
Yeah. I'm a big proponent of informational meetings, just to get the word out. You want transparency in everything an HOA does, and especially if you're looking to have a vote or an amendment, definitely want to get the word out and make sure people are well aware. that it's coming down the pike and they feel informed on the process, you're more likely to get a positive vote in that case if people feel informed.
Yeah.
But certainly that's true. If you have a lot of rentals already, it's going to be a lot harder to get that 67% because every home that's rented now is going to be a no vote on that proposed amendment.
Right.
Once a home goes rental, it usually stays a rental home. So
Right.
it's important if it's something you're looking at to get on it pretty quickly.
Right. Well, and you all can offer some perspective and some advice for communities that are, looking at that. So
This is something that we do we recommend almost all of our new clients. We say, do you have a leasing restriction? Because it can spiral once community starts going rentals. It can go more and more rentals.
Right, becomes an epidemic. So if a board is pursuing an amendment of that kind, what are some, maybe just highlight the main specifications that they should include?
So we would typically, the board would want to have maybe 15% cap. That's normally what we recommend, 15 to, could be 10 to 20, could be whatever percentage the board wants, but a cap on the number of homes that can be rented at any one time, and you would have a application process and a waiting list that would have to be maintained. We have a few HOAs that say, rather than doing a cap, they say you have to live in the home for at least 1 year before it can be rented. That's designed to deter investors from buying properties. Then we would define what constitutes a lease. You may be letting your cousin use it. Oh, well, that's a family member, right? Well, it may or may not be. Are they paying the HOA dues or the taxes? Well, that would be rent. That would be a lease. But if your brother is staying there for a few months, maybe that's not a lease. So you might have some a little special dispensation for family members. We would talk about what the minimum length of the lease should be, usually a minimum of 6 months. And we also, when we do it, we try to have a little bit of leeway in there for the board to allow some variances, even if, say, the 15% is full, but someone has to go to Seattle for a year to care for their sick parent. Well, that seems like a fair thing to let them rent for, say, a year, but in that year you've got to get it sold at the end of that year or you got to move back in. It's okay for a board to have some discretion as long as you've given specifics of how that discretion can be used. So those are the types of things we would put in a leasing amendment.
Yeah. Well, and one thing we find that can be a challenge, if an amendment passes, it's part of the documents that are recorded. And so potential buyers are, our office provides those governing documents, at the closing, but they don't always read them. And so it's an interesting challenge because there's issues sometimes when they thought they could rent and they can't, or they didn't know there was a limit.
Right. I think it's important when you're looking at buying a new home or a condo, especially your townhome, check and see if there's rental restrictions. You may want to rent yours one day in the future and may not be able to. If you're buying it as an investor, be very wary.
Yeah.
But you also may want to know that there are limits so that your community you're buying into doesn't become, a rental community without your knowledge over time. So that's a very important thing to look at for sure.
Well, and just as a note to viewers, the governing documents are public documents. You can go online with the Register of Deeds in the county where the community is. And if there's any questions, you can reach out to a board member or the management company for that community.
Yep, definitely should do that.
It's all about just, educating yourself
Being
about
aware,
what you're looking at.
For sure.
So let's ask a question about Airbnb homes. It's something that has grown in popularity recently, and of course, some communities in North Carolina are vacation home communities, where you have short-term rentals, but how do we address it if someone wants to have an Airbnb property in an HOA? Right.
I think most HOAs are going to have a restriction already in their documents that say no property can be leased for less than 30 or 90 or 6 months. That's pretty common. If you don't have that in your documents, you need to see us immediately because you need to get that in there. But so an Airbnb would be a violation of that. But you may not know that that's occurring, so I think we encourage everybody to, after you watch this video, go Google your neighborhood or go put it in Airbnb and see if there are listings in your neighborhood for Airbnb, or VRBO is another one.
Yes.
That would be a violation of leasing policy, and certainly we can fine the owner and follow the standard disciplinary a system for doing that. It typically would be a violation.
So that's interesting because there's no sign, there's no advertising in the community. It could really be
Right.
happening.
And you
just
and I
don't know.
typically don't get invited to these bachelor parties either, which I
Right,
think
we
is
miss
a
out on
little
all these fun
disappointing.
things.
I know.
Well, okay, so that's a good thought for folks to check into, you know. So what if we have a scenario where a community knows there are some violations after they have put restrictions in place? Is it your typical, process of holding a hearing and addressing it the same way?
Yes, you would follow the same procedure to call the owner, not the tenant, but the owner into a hearing, and they can be fined. You could even potentially get an injunction from a court. That's very rare. And don't forget also to assess that owner with any cost. For instance, if it's a condo building, you may have to rekey the main entrance. You may have to reprogram security codes and things, and those costs should be assessed against that owner if they are leasing in violation of these restrictions.
You know what's important that you mentioned is any violations are with the owner and not the tenant. It's a good point because remember the tenant is under a lease agreement with the owner, and so they're not subject to the HOA restrictions directly.
Correct.
It's more an indirect.
But the property certainly is, and the owner is.
Right. So keep that in mind. Today's Truth, thank you for joining in. Use it to make you smarter. And until next time, we'll see you again. Visit our website at www.keycmi.com for more helpful information. And Zac, your firm has a website as well.
We are Moretz and Skufca.com. I won't try to spell that for you, but we represent HOAs all throughout North Carolina and South Carolina.
Great. Thank you.